My name is Victor Furman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. Consciousness and real estate are terms that one would think as mutually exclusive, but not according to my guest, Matt Parker. Matt says a well-balanced lifestyle, including a balanced approach to home selling and buying, is important to both the millennials and the baby boomers. He says wrong home choices can negatively impact our health and happiness. He also addresses the needs of the growing LGBT and same-sex couples market. Matt Parker is a real estate professional in Seattle and became a top producer in his market during the real estate collapse of 2008 before he was 30. He works entirely paperless and happily lives in a 560-square-foot condo with his wife, prioritizing living and not clutter. He's the author of Real Estate Smart, the New Home Buying Guide, and the Amazon unranked Real Estate Secrets, and his latest book, The Real Estate Agent Talks. Please welcome Matt Parker. Good evening, Matt. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
So, Matt, what first attracted you to real estate selling?
I've been in sales in professional sports in Southern California and in Portland, Oregon, and did well in those industries, and then wanted to work on my own in a selling capacity, and so I felt like real estate sales was the freest way to do that, and so that's why I got involved in it, and I've never kind of looked back since that time.
Wonderful. Now, how did you fare so well when others were falling apart when the bubble burst in 2008?
Yeah, what a lot of people don't realize is in 2008, obviously we had the Great Recession and the real estate bubble popping, but it was simultaneous to the great expansion of electronic information, how that affected how people shop for and buy real estate. In particular, the information that Redfin and Zillow disseminated just prior to 2008 and during the collapse were really widespread, and a lot of agents, I don't feel like necessarily knew what to do with that information and were maybe more scared that all this information was out there as opposed to figuring out how to use it and help customers use it. So I kind of took those two things, the pain of the marketplace and the dissemination of electronic information, and tried to become an expert in marketing people's properties in the new world, which is now obviously an electronic world, and it worked out well for me, and I was able to adapt.
Now, were you a pioneer in doing that?
Absolutely not. No, it's a lot of that started around the turn of the millennium, but I think within the industry there's been a lot of fear with regard to websites like, for example, Zillow, that provide massive amounts of information to buyers, that to the extent that buyers know way more about properties than I do when we get to them. And so I think, though, just being an agent that was not scared of it and being able to incorporate it into my business and support it really gives a well-rounded service to the customer. And so there's absolutely many people and companies before me that were delving into that. But I guess in my marketplace, I was young enough and risk-taking enough to embrace it and run forward with it.
Wonderful. Let's talk a little bit about your hometown. As a real estate professional in Seattle, have you seen any increased activity in the market since 50 Shades of Grey was released? Now, my wife tells me that the infamous Mr. Christian Grey, she says the infamous Mr. Christian Grey owned the penthouse in the upscale Escala in the books. Are you familiar with that property?
Yes, I am. That's hilarious.
Yeah, my wife is kind of a 50 grades of Shea connoisseur, let's say.
Oh, that's funny, because my wife had it, either the second or the third book on her nightstand relatively recently. So that's hilarious that you would bring that up. But that's really, really funny. Have I noticed an uptick in business? Well, Not necessarily, but I'm glad it hasn't landed me in trouble either with any of my customers and any risque ideas they might have.
That's funny. Do movies and TV shows have an impact in general? I remember Tom Hanks' character looking for homes on the water in Sleepless in Seattle.
But I think as people come to town, yes, they can identify a movie or a spot in a movie and relate that to something important or something very soulful about a particular city. So, yeah, that area down there where Sleepless in Seattle was filmed, people always, not always, but a lot of times they'll ask about it or ask where that was, or when they see a street that they think was relatable or in the movie, they'll bring that up. And I think, potentially that could increase in some small kind of disconnected way the value of a place. But I do remember that, and I remember actually running into Tom Hanks in the Kingdome, Seattle Kingdome at the time. He was in one of the suites and almost saved my brother from a foul ball hitting him in the face. And he had a Mariners hat on. He was a big baseball fan. So they tore the Kingdome down after that, so I don't know that it helped real estate values there. But yeah.
So in general, the popularization of certain areas in media doesn't really seem to have that much of an effect on real estate.
Not necessarily. I don't think, because when push comes to shove, people don't just look at one property in one neighborhood. Like, they might get inspired to look on Westlake or East Lake Union, which is where all those houseboats were from that particular movie, Sleepless in Seattle. But they don't just look at one property or two properties. They look at multiple properties and then compare values across the board. So I find that for all buyers and sellers, it ultimately comes down to their very distinct personal choices and flavors. And I think that they might get into a market or look at a market for a movie, but not necessarily buy a property because of that.
Now, with major corporations like Microsoft and Amazon and Starbucks based in your area, has this had an impact on the real estate market?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a real sense, people that I talk to in the city right now in Google, people in the city right now is thinking that we absolutely cannot have another recession in Seattle, that real estate prices in Seattle have jumped up to astronomical levels that will never come back down, that there's no space in the city, and we are have a platinum road in front of us as far as real estate value and prosperity. So that's the message now, but, funny enough, I'm not, the older generations have seen a lot more of this than I have, but that was definitely the way it felt in 2007 too. And so, I just remind people that it feels really good when it's going well, but it can change really, really quickly. We hope it doesn't happen as roughly as it did in 2007, but absolutely the Amazon influence is probably the biggest one you hear of in Seattle now, far bigger than what you heard about for the previous decades was the Boeing employee. And now you get the tech buyer from Amazon or Facebook or Google or any of these places. And there's really an impression that these people are buying the real estate as well as international people from the East. So, yeah, people feel really good about our market here right now and kind of want to compare it to San Francisco, which, of course, we're not there yet. But that's the general feeling.
Yeah, here in my hometown of New York, the areas in proximity to Manhattan, which most people know as New York City, have gone crazy in terms of the market boom, and old areas which were warehouses and rundown neighborhoods were basically ripped up, and you have condominiums and high-rises and all types of properties there going for phenomenal amounts of money because of the fact that it's one subway stop or so away from Manhattan.
Absolutely, and that's hilarious because the same thing is happening here, and I sold a property last week that I was joking around with my friend. My parents wouldn't have let me go in this neighborhood when I was growing up, but it had multiple offers on it and huge amounts of showings. And yeah, the gentrification and the improvement of these neighborhoods is just very, very great. And these places are just really, really changing. And there's still fringe neighborhoods though, where across one street you can get a lot more of a rundown type place, or maybe even a historic looking neighborhood. And then of course you also have what I hear people complain about Seattle right now is the homeless issue. And so that's a factor too, because that's kind of somewhere in a gray area floating around this development and these processes. So yeah, it's very, very interesting times. And now it's interesting because in the last decade we've seen it as low as it can get and as high as it can get. So who knows what's next?
Yeah, we're very fortunate here in the New York and Northeast, and in particular in the New York area, because there's been such a boom not only in building residential structures but also infrastructure repair. So we're doing very well in this part of the country, and we're grateful for the fact that that's happening. Now let's talk about millennials for a moment. We've heard that millennials have a hard time leaving their parents' homes. When they do, what are they looking for?
Yeah, generally speaking, I think conceptually smaller places, and the easiest example of this is the dining room is a room that a lot of folks have no use for and wouldn't really use. So conceptually smaller places, the floor plans, millennials are preferring, by and large, this is an oversimplification, but the floor plans they're preferring are open concept floor plans where you can have great rooms where you have meals and do home work and also study and also watch TV. So think of a great room with a kitchen set up. People spend a lot of times in those. And I also think that this term walkability that maybe people didn't understand a decade ago is a big deal to people in cities like New York and Seattle. And I hear it from almost every one of my buyers now. They want a neighborhood that's particularly walkable because the average commute time in our country, of course, is close to an hour a day for most people. And if they have time after work, it's fun to walk to get a gallon of milk. Whereas maybe that wouldn't have been as cool even a decade or 15 years ago. So yeah, I think generally speaking, smaller places, generally speaking, more open places, and the walkability thing I think is important to people, along with a number of other factors. And still the thing that all generations have always preferred and continue to prefer, the National Association of Realtors puts out a study every year what buyers are looking for. And the number one thing that buyers still look for is a mother-in-law or an ADU attached to their residence. So somewhere you can have someone else stay, whether that's a family member or a friend or VRBO it or something like that. So I think even VRBO and home away have had a big impact on how people view extra space in their property. If you have extra space that you're not using, you really are just paying 43% of your mortgage value to heat empty air. So extra living square footage has always been popular, but continues to be.
And my guest is Matt Parker. He's the author of the brand new book, The Real Estate Agent Talks, and we'll be back with more of Matt after these messages on the OMTimes Radio Network.
As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hi, this is Sylvia Henderson, intuitive life coach and energy healer. Are you ready to elevate and rise way above your normal? Be sure to listen to my show, Intuitive Transformations, on OMTimes Radio, Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. Get the inspiration you need to transform your life.
And we're back on Destination Unlimited. My guest this evening is Matt Parker, author of the new book, The Real Estate Agent Talks. We were talking before the break about millennials and their needs, and you were talking about how they're less likely to have a dining room and more likely to have a combination room where they can eat and do homework and things of that nature. Also, what's this trend about mini houses that we hear so much about?
Yeah, and again, it's some of the other topics we'll talk about today. I'm more confident in speaking about because there's lots of statistics to back them up and lots of studies. So I get asked a lot about the tiny home phenomena, but when I speak about it, it's mostly opinion or things that I've read about uh, almost hypothetically, because there really isn't a tested market for this product yet, and there's not massive numbers or statistics to back anything up. So I just want to make that clear. But it's a very hot topic, and a lot of people are talking about it and asking about it. And my first seller asked if they could build a tiny home on their place just about 10 days ago. So it's very relevant, I think. And what has happened to the home is it used to be, 100, 75, 50 years ago, it used to be somewhere you went home to and stayed at the end of every day and for much of every weekend. And it's kind of become the opposite of that. It's somewhere you touch down at and then you leave again really quickly. Statistically true, we spend less time at home, especially millennials, less so than any other generations in the past. And so I think with the amount of time we spend at home going down, the amount of commuting going up, utility costs going up, and utilities that we never used to have before, for example, the $100 technology fee with your local cable service provider, that people see extra square footage in their home as wasteful. And so you have younger people who are in big cities where housing is very expensive, or even in mid-sized cities where the rents seem astronomical to someone. For example, a teacher, my wife is a teacher, might think, well, why would I want to either buy or rent a place and then just heat empty space or have empty space or pay for empty space? So yeah, the tiny home has become very popular, but it's problematic to purchase, develop, and finance because there's not appraisals to allow for the construction of them. So it's a little bit of a chicken-egg issue, and I think probably a major national lender or builder is going to have to get on board with constructing these or helping sell them somehow, because en masse, they're very, very difficult to actually build or buy because they can't get appraisals on them. So I said a lot there about tiny homes, but it's a huge topic I get asked about almost every day.
Is this something that's media-driven? Because I had never heard of tiny homes until I saw it on television.
Yeah, I mostly think it's media-driven because it's definitely not, like I said, there's not sales that someone can put their finger on and say, this is how much they cost, prices are increasing by this much. The media, one of the problems we have with the media, I like the media, but some of the shows cling on to things that are more atypical of society because they're interesting to us. And the tiny home, although I think it's really cool, and I myself and my wife live in a smaller place, it's more of a fringe type thing without much data or a market behind it. So, yeah, I think it's media driven, but the consumers too like it. I think one reason it really appeals to people is because with construction costs being really, really high right now, including remodeling, they really show people how to use space well. And that's been going on in some of the Eastern nations for a long time, particularly Japan, where they use small spaces very, very well. So I think that might be part of what's at the core for people really falling in love with this is if they have a small space or an underutilized space, they can really look into some of these ideas and say, wow, I can make this really cool, or I can do this with it, or I can make this an eating and a computer station. So I do think, to answer your question directly, a lot of it is media and our interest in consuming media for things that are atypical to most families' lives.
You mentioned living in Japan, and I remember seeing a documentary where they had these hotels which were basically bunk bed rooms stacked one on top of another. And when I guess space is a premium and you're just going to need a place really to sleep, wash up, and go, that type of habitat is something that's popular.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, less and less time being spent at home. And it's also a space you might have to clean up. Right, the more space you have, the more you have to clean and manage. I hope that, and I think that residences will shrink in size with the cost of land being high and construction costs probably being at an all-time high right now. That's just a guess, but In Seattle, we're saying it's $200 a square foot. I don't know what it is in New York, but that's really high for our market. So it seems like size of things would have to come down. And I think there's a huge, we were talking about feng shui before we got on the air here, but there's a huge market for not more space, but better space. Yeah. And that's really what I try to cover in one of my books is how do you get the most out of your space? And tiny homes are the most extreme example of that. So they're very popular.
Which book was that you cover that in?
Real Estate Smart.
Okay, that was Real Estate Smart, which came out about a year ago or so?
Correct, yes. Yep.
Okay. Now, in terms of singles, again, we talked to millennials. Let's talk singles for a minute. Is there still such a thing as the bachelor or bachelorette pad, or is this a relic of the past?
Well, you're you're talking to the wrong guy because I did it for a long time, and my brother did it for a long time, and I'm thinking of one to multiples of my friends who have done it or are doing it. So I really don't think it's a relic. They're a little bit tougher to sell because they can be very bent one sex or another depending on who's residing in it and their preferences and things. But a lot of times with a couple in a property, it has a more balanced design style that appeals to a wider range of people. But yeah, the bachelor pad is definitely in full swing, especially around our city, as far as I can tell.
I would guess that any city, any major urban area probably still has a lot of single people and have homes like that.
Yeah, correct. And I know people that have multiple pads, if you will, for me within, short distance from each other. So it's a very real thing. Yeah.
Okay. Your new book, The Real Estate Agent Talks, is specifically aimed at those who are new in the field. What are the most important skills or tips that you would share with a new agent?
It's age old, but I really think the power of a real estate agent is in listening and not in talking. And so I really think agents, as they get into it, have an impression that they need to say magical things or be very salesy. But I think the opposite is more true, and it applies in our relationships with our loved ones and our romantic relationships too. Is just listening is the most powerful thing I've learned over the years as far as real estate.
Absolutely.
And the more I talk when I go into places, I still make the mistake, and probably will make the mistake for my entire career of saying things and then not realizing that, I wasn't listening to my customer and I said something that offended them. The thing that drives the housing market is that we're all very, very different. We're all similar in a lot of ways as humans, but the differences make every property sell. And so we try not to pass any judgment on a property or any finish level and really listen to people. And I think if you listen to people and wake up and try to meet people and listen to them, it's very difficult actually to not be successful in real estate because there's a shortage of people that listen in our society, and I think that's a really powerful tool.
Absolutely. The fact that you show concern by listening and caring by listening, not just in sales of any kind, but just in everyday life, that we have this tendency, the old expression, we have two ears and one mouth, listen twice, speak once. I think that more people could benefit from that old expression.
That's great. I wish I'd just written that down.
Okay, here it is. I'll give it to you one more time. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen twice, speak once. There you go.
I like it.
Absolutely.
Easy enough.
Absolutely. What other tips would you have for new agents?
I really think as I look back at my career and at other agents' careers, you need to be prepared for several years of challenges. And, there's another, when we look at the media and read the news and watch shows, we feel, of course I feel this sometimes, like success in any endeavor is really quickly earned and has a quick turnaround time. But, for the vast majority of people, including the super intelligent, super wealthy, it isn't. It takes a long time to be successful at things. And my first 2-3 years were very, very difficult. I remember working in the soil and then changing into a shirt and tie out of the back of my car, kind of wiping dirt off my face to go to a meeting. So I would encourage people to be ready for 2 to 3 years. And I think once you can get past that in most markets, from what I've heard talking to people, that you can really have a a really wonderful career. And like I said, if you enjoy listening to people and interacting with people, it's kind of a dream job that I've never really stopped loving. And people ask me a lot, why haven't you managed your own company, or why haven't you created your own company? And the bottom line factor for me is I just love interacting with small groups of people, and it's really enjoyable to me. So for a personality type like that, just stick with it for a couple, 3 years, and I think that you'll grow a tree that will drop apples in your basket every year, some years less and some years more, and just enjoy it.
My guest this evening on Destination Unlimited is Matt Parker. Matt, please tell our listeners where they can get all of your books and find out more about you.
Yeah, at mattcparker.com. And also, my books are all available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and most online platforms for buying hard copy books, and also electronic and audible books.
And as we say every week on our show when we have an author on, if you still have the blessing and the privilege and the honor of having a local bookstore in your neighborhood, go to your local bookstore to buy Matt's books. Ask for his books. If they don't have them, I'm sure they'll get them for you, because the local bookstore, the neighborhood bookstore, is a vanishing breed, and we need to keep them alive and well. And we'll be back with more of Matt Parker on Destination Unlimited on the OMTimes Radio Network after these messages.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM Radio Network.
Are you in an interfaith relationship and thinking of getting married? For 18 years, Reverend Laurie Sue Brockway has been creating personalized, loving, and romantic ceremonies for couples of all faiths and cultural backgrounds. Reverend Laurie Sue's sensitivity to the needs of interfaith couples is reflected in the compassionate and inclusive way she addresses the concerns of parents and families. Reverend Laurie Sue is also the author of several best-selling books on interfaith weddings and wedding vows. Selected as one of the top interfaith officiants by New York Magazine, Reverend Laurie Sue serves couples in the New York metropolitan area and beyond. Find out more at her website, yourinterfaithwedding.com.
Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Hey America, we need to have a little talk. We've got more food than we know what to do with in this country, yet 17 million kids in America are struggling with hunger. Makes no sense. Luckily, the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks has volunteers gathering excess food and getting it to hungry kids. They're kind of like food angels. Hey, become a food angel yourself by supporting Feeding America in your local food bank at feedingamerica.org. We can't do it without your help. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
And we're back on Destination Unlimited. My guest this evening, Matt Parker. Matt is the author of Real Estate Smart, the New Home Buying Guide, the Amazon number one ranked real estate secrets, and his latest book, The Real Estate Agent Talks. Welcome back, Matt, and thank you for joining us again this evening.
Hey, this is a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Now, when your book, The Real Estate, I'm going to edit that out. I had a little glitch there. Sorry.
Yeah.
In your book, you emphasize that presenting complex market analysis is very important. What does it mean to the prospective buyer?
Complex market analysis with regard to, you talking about health factors there or value factors in a home?
I'm not sure. The term was complex market analysis, and it's very important that the buyer understand what that means.
Okay. Maybe this is in reference to the cost of home ownership, not just relatable to the mortgage. So you've got your mortgage and obviously your taxes and insurance. But when I ran the numbers, I found that people are spending approximately 43% of their mortgage value on utility-based factors every month to include long-term service on the property. So it's really important when you're looking to buy a home, especially as you're younger, because you don't think or know about a lot of these things in your first or second home. But not only the mortgage, taxes, and insurance, but then you've got another bill on top of that, which is the ongoing maintenance and upkeep of your property, which is significant. So if your mortgage is $2,000 a month with your taxes and insurance, you're looking at another almost $900 bill for the upkeep of the property. So really factor that in and be prepared with your rainy day fund. They just had today online, that figure that some 60 or whatever percentage it was that people don't have an extra $1,000. And definitely on your first or second home, you don't want to find yourself in that situation because everything is $1,000 now to repair or replace.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You want to be ready for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you recommend these maintenance contracts that are offered by various companies?
Carte blanche, I'd be afraid to say one way or another. I hate to give you it depends answer, but definitely it does depend. If you're out of area, so if it is a property that's very difficult for you to get to, or it's in a different city, and you trust the service provider, I think they're very, very valuable. If a property is nearby and you don't feel like you have an affordable, trustworthy company for it, then probably has less value. But definitely with the right property manager and service manager, there's huge value in helping to manage real estate because the time involved in it is just it's huge. If you've done it before, you know what I'm talking about with regard to booking people to work on your property, keep it clean, and make sure that they're doing it correctly. So there can be huge value there if you have a really good company working for you.
Actually, I was referring to the companies that offer what's basically an insurance contract. So, for example, if your water heater breaks down and you have a contract with
warranty.
Warranty company, that's correct, yes.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And a few times my customers have had to call on those companies. They have easily come through and paid their worth. And what's cool about that is in most cases, you can get the seller to pay for the warranty on a closing, and they tend to be approximately $500. They can go up to like $1,000 or so, but generally speaking, for $500, you can get a really quality warranty program. And like we were just talking about, everything nowadays is $1,000. So the $500 warranty that the seller paid for in a property that's transferred is kind of a no-brainer. So I encourage buyers to write that in if they can to their deals.
Absolutely. I've owned my home for several years, and I got one of these contracts, and I had to replace my water heater last year. And basically the replacement, if I had to replace that without the maintenance, the warranty contract, it would have cost me about $1,200, which is more than the cost of the annual contract plus the deductible that I had. So it definitely paid for itself in that one repair.
Absolutely. And that was a relatively small item, too. I mean, I saw one customer where they had their pipes break in the wintertime, and then they got help with that, and those issues can get really, really expensive. So, for $500, I think it's good, especially if you can get the seller to pay for it on the way out the door, even wrap it into the purchase price. And it's really a forgotten fee when you're buying a house. So I would say just throw it in there. It's like buying a pack of gum at the supermarket.
Right.
Just do it.
I like the analogy.
Yeah.
Getting back into being a real estate agent today, where do agents meet their clients these days?
Yeah, great question. So I hate to put it into oversimplify it and put it into really two groups, but you know, it probably could be done to say there's two big general categories. One of them is actually physically meeting people the old-fashioned way, which is you meet them at an open house, or they're people that you know, you're coaching a soccer team, and people talk to you about what you do. So the old-fashioned way of actually physically meeting people. And then there's also electronic presence, and there's a massive advertising industry based on us real estate agents paying for leads online to come into us. And the difference is the person you meet physically is generally, by the time they talk to you about real estate seriously, they've really chosen you, and they're going to give you. Yeah, so an internet lead you're going to have to pick up immediately, and by immediately I mean respond to it within 0 to 15 minutes, and then begin an exchange with someone electronically and sustain that exchange, and that could turn into a showing or down the road a listing that you might go ahead and sell. So I think it depends on the person and the company, and there's also probably a hybrid method where there's really interactive people that also rely on internet leads but aren't actively pinging back on them all day. So yeah, for people to meet people physically and electronically, and of course we have to believe the electronic means is just going to continue to grow.
Absolutely. Yes. We talk about social media today and digital communication, and the fact that it sort of depersonalizes relationships. Do you find that happening also in real estate?
Well, I will say I've never in my entire career gotten a lead off of Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, not once.
Okay.
Directly or indirectly. And so does this depersonalize things? I do think the electronic leads are far more likely to stand you up or not respond to you, which is a huge deal if you're selling real estate in a place like Seattle, because a showing can take 3 or 4 hours depending on traffic. Mm-hmm. So if you've only had electronic contact with someone and they're asking for a service which is ultimately free, and then they bail on you, it's really, really a bad feeling in your gut. So the electronic communication can depersonalize things. So when I get into actually putting in real work for people, I definitely do want some more contact information out of them, so I can see that there's a heart beating on the other side that cares about my time as well.
Absolutely. I don't know about your marketplace, but in the New York area, New Jersey area, we often see signs and billboards where the agent's face is associated with the property being sold. How important is that?
I see that in some markets, and I completely don't see it in other markets. It's name association for a real estate agent is huge. Whether or not they want to put their face on it, I think, is a personal preference. I've never put my face on it. My face wouldn't help sell any real estate or help me get any business, probably. So I've shied away from that and done okay. So I think it depends on the person. And that's the great thing about real estate is there's lots of ways to find business using all these different marketing tactics. Another one that's very difficult for me is to solicit my friends for real estate business. Very difficult for me. So, and then that's one of the first things to teach you is to grow this very close sphere of yours and sell to your friends. But it's very difficult for me to ask my close friends for work or their families. I don't want that expectation placed and kind of muddled with it. So put your face on a billboard, yes or no, I think it's a personal preference, and I don't necessarily think it hurts or helps an agent.
Now, you mentioned you had made the transition from one sales market to another to the real estate market. Mm-hmm. Is that something that anyone in sales should do or can do?
If you're in sales and you enjoy it, I definitely recommend looking into real estate sales. And then the difference is if you have a corporate sales job, of which I've had several, you really have a system in place to, quote, motivate you to do things on a daily basis and get into work at a certain time and put up certain sales numbers. So you don't have that in real estate sales, except for anything that you enforce upon yourself. And so I really think if you're going to go into real estate sales, you really need to be confident in your ability to set goals and achieve them within a day. And early in your career, that just means how many calls you're going to make, because you're not going to make any sales your first 3 to 6 months probably. And so, yeah, people from other sales jobs can easily get into real estate. And I think people that are trained in sales like I was can do really, really, really well, because generally speaking, there's a shortage of classic sales training in real estate as far as the sales process and understanding what a customer goes through when they buy anything from a gumball to a mansion. And so salespeople, I think, would have an advantage, but they just have to be motivated by their own goals, and then, wake up early and hungover as few times as possible throughout the course of the month, and do what you can do, and continue to do it consistently, even when you've had a really good month or something.
Self-motivation and time management, essential.
You just saved 3 minutes. Yeah.
And how difficult is it for someone to break into the industry, to learn the ins and outs?
The ins and outs are easy. I mean, you need very little education. In my state, you can get the real estate degree, or whatever they call it now, within, I think I got mine in 2 weeks. So the ins and outs and the details and filling out paperwork are things that are ultimately all going to be automated. The difficult thing, the hardest thing about real estate is being honest with people and kind and patient when you don't want to, and about the biggest purchases people make. And, you can't be emotional, or you shouldn't be emotional with people, and you need to be very, listen out a lot, like we talked about earlier, and then be able to communicate clearly even when people are upset or crying or yelling at you, because you have to be professional. So I think that's the hardest part for most people. The ins and outs are very, very simple, but once you have confidence in the skill to talk to people in a grown-up way when you're going through really stressful things, I think you're on your way to a really good real estate career. And if you're enjoying it, it's just going to be really great, because it's second nature at that point.
And we'll discuss this further with our guest, Matt Parker, author of The Real Estate Agent Talks, on the OMTimes radio network after these messages.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
This is Terry Van Horn, and I want to invite you to join me for my weekly radio show, Hailing Light, on OMTimes Radio every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Hailing Light, we want to bring love, light, and blessings into your world. You can find out more about us at www.healinglightonline.com. Blessings.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for inspired conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest tonight, Matt Parker, author of the new book, The Real Estate Agent Talks. So in your book, you discuss preparing a home, staging a home for sale. What is that process like?
Yeah, so first of all, you have to be, as from a real estate practitioner standpoint, you need to be in touch with what your local marketplace is, and that could change even within a city. For example, in New York, are you in the city downtown? Are you in a predominantly condo neighborhood? Are you on the fringe of the city or completely out of the city. So being in touch with the style preferences and space preferences in your locale, specific locale, that's the first thing. And then analyzing any potential listing or property to sell based on what you know about the style preferences. And then also what I think most people would not say is understanding the customer, because some customers you can tell do this, do this, do this, and they'll all do three things that you just mentioned, and they won't take any exception to it or be hurt by it. But, home is someone's far and away one of their most private, if not the most private thing that they own. And they love there, they laugh there, they lose there, they share there. People die in your homes, you start and end relationships in your home. So to tell someone to do something with something that's been perfectly fine for 10 years, to sell it can be a very hurtful thing. So in understanding your customer, after having listened to them and gotten a feeling for who they are, you can tell them yourself how you think it needs to be staged and help them with that. But a lot of times I'll bring a professional stager, or you have feng shui people you can bring in that are very, very helpful to conceptually representing the home so that buyers will like it. And I find the stagers are professionals in engaging the sellers with this conversation in a very respectful way, because it can be a very hurtful conversation and topics if it's not done correctly. And so then from there, you have work that the seller can do. They can make fixes and repairs to their home, paint colors, fixtures, lighting fixtures, knobs and handles. And then a lot of times also you'll have furniture that can be brought in, which is another thing that stagers can be paid to do. And they'll bring furniture in.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful that you bring consciousness to this process, because, as you say, there's so much emotional tie when someone is ready to leave their home and sell their home, often at times of retirement or relocating, and that having that consciousness and really listening and feeling what they're feeling is so important to completing the process in a very happy way.
Oh, it's huge, and it's something still at the end of my days I feel good or bad about based on my ability to do it well with people. I just always think of my mom, and I think of some slick salesperson walking into her home and asking her to, change a garden that she's been propagating for 20 years, or remove something on a wall that was created by deceased great-grandfather or something. And so I just always try to be very careful to feel out people before I give them advice, because those can be very hurtful things, and selling is already a really emotionally laden process, and I believe you should take it very, very seriously. So that's nice that you say that.
Absolutely. Now, we've discussed what the seller goes through. What about home buyer emotion? How does that affect the process?
Yeah, so buyer's remorse is a real and palpable thing. Every buyer feels it. I believe it's clinically measurable. And buyer's remorse is greater the higher dollar value for something. So if we go back to our gumball example, there's almost no buyer's remorse after buying a gumball. But when you get up to the point of buying a $800,000 home, plus or minus, you can have huge amounts of buyer's remorse, and it's a normal part of the escrow process for a buyer. So if it's normal buyer's remorse and they're still making a good decision, usually it passes in a day or two. But if a buyer is still stewing on this idea that they made a bad decision 3, 4, 5, 6 days into the transaction, a lot of times I really take that as a sign that it's just a bad deal for them. And so what I try to do is explain to a buyer when we're looking at properties, when you buy a property, the following 2 to 3 days, you're going to feel X, Y, and Z. And it's going to feel like this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to, you're going to want to take the dog at home or whatever it might be. Don't do it. That's how it feels, and then it usually passes after another day. And a lot of people, I think, are thankful for that advice because they feel it and get past it. But some people don't get past it, and that's when, as an agent, you can look at the customer and say, well, this is just a bad deal for you. Let's pull the plug on it. So I think that buyer's remorse is a really strong emotion, and really what it is your subconscious analyzing what the heck you've gotten yourself into for, statistically speaking, the next 10 years.
It almost sounds like a good real estate agent has to be somewhat of a therapist when dealing with their clients.
Well, they say that a lot, and that's a really fine line, because you can find yourself in some pretty personal situations if you get too far down that road. So there's some fine line in there where you're very friendly and also professional at the same time, and still trying to figure out exactly where that line is in a lot of places. But I definitely think that, yes, a therapist is something you're going to be bent towards sometimes in a real estate transaction.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of selling that involves psychology. I think all selling involves psychology, and as a conscious person, being willing to listen, understand, and then let them out of that situation, I think is a very important thing.
Right, the no guilt let out, and that's one thing that in my customers, some that have reviewed me favorably, that's important to them. They say, well, we passed up this sale, and I felt really good when Matt didn't put any pressure on me. So I think that earns a lot of trust and maybe a lifelong customer.
Absolutely. Now, someone looking for a home who has children has certain considerations. What do you look for in placing a family in a home where children are involved?
Yeah, so there's usually a primary person that deals with the children and or the pets. So a very important question for them is, do they feel good walking out of this property and walking around the block or walking a block away from the property? Do they physically feel good when they leave the property, or when they leave the property and go in front of the neighbors or across the street, do they feel bad? And it's a really simple question, but it's a really important one to ask, because you don't want to, when people are leaving their property, you don't want people feeling bad, and that's something that never tends to change. Is important, and is also very intuitive to people whether or not they're going to feel good or bad about a property. So I think that's a real important one.
And when people look at a property, how often do they bring their children with them?
Less than half the time, and sometimes the children will come later along during the transaction. But I think as much as parents and as we as adults don't like to get excited about things and then let down, a lot of people don't like their kids to fall in love with the place because it has a cool pool and a slide in the backyard and a really fun tree with a rope swing, but then, we're not buying that property. So I think kids come along later in the process so they don't get the Easter basket pulled away from them.
Absolutely. Now, how has the legal acceptance of same-sex marriage impacted the real estate industry?
It has made it fairer, and I don't want to say it's fair because there's still an underlying discrimination that may not matter in the majority of cases, but can make a big difference, especially in a market like Seattle, where you have multiple offers, and a lot of times people, the names are on the contracts of these deals from the buyers that they're wanting the sellers to accept. Seller might have 10 offers in front of them, and people with same-sex couples that may be evident by the names, and of course different nationalities are evident by the names that are on the contracts. And so I hate to think that certain deals could be favored over others based on what you think your neighbors want in your neighborhood or who you want to buy your house, but we have to admit that happens. And so, I think it's very, very important that we support the use of neutral language, and ultimately, a lot of people would make the case that marriage was an institution that was pushed forward because of real estate, because that's how in 17th and 16th century Catholic churches and tried to figure out who gets what property when someone dies. And so, one reason that Supreme Court law came to be last August was because of real estate cases and because people who had long-time tenure relationships couldn't pass on real estate to each other, which is ridiculous. So if someone's upset about having to use neutral language or being politically correct or something, I get it. It frustrates me at times. But what we have to remember is that you're talking about the greatest wealth-passing institution in the history of the world, and it needs to be fair. So we need fair language, and we need people to be treated fairly, whether or not you want them in your neighborhood or feel comfortable with them in your neighborhood. And I don't think it's widespread. In Seattle is a very liberal place. New York is too, but I just think it's important that people it's not affecting support the neutrality of it so that everyone has a fair shot. in this wealth creation and passing on game, and no one feels like an underdog in it. I think it's very important.
How does one advertise to the LGBT-friendly community without excluding other buyers in the process?
See, I think it's very difficult. I personally could not do it. I don't know. I think it's going to be hard, and I think people might begin to get in trouble for that because, one thing you got to be careful of is by promoting a certain group of people, you're not cutting out other groups of people. And, a stigma in Seattle could be said that they want those same-sex couples in their neighborhood because whatever things that are assumed of those couples that I'm not comfortable saying or believing are preferable traits. But then the problem is you have other groups of people that may have less, quote, preferable traits and where they fall in. So my answer to the whole thing is to try and treat everyone equally and give everyone an equal shot. And it's comes down to the numbers and the deals and the terms of the deals and to really try to base things on that. Even when you're marketing for yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we have about 30 seconds left. What does the future of real estate look like in your mind?
Electronic. I think a lot of agents are going to go away, and we will not die as an industry, but it's all going to be electronic, and this will all happen in clicks, hopefully very soon.
Amazon.realty.com, is that what you're thinking about?
Man, that would be great if they could ease up the paperwork for me.
My guest tonight, Matt Parker. Matt's the author of the new book, The Real Estate Agent Talks. Matt, one more time, please tell our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you.
A bookstore near you, Amazon.com, BarnesandNobles.com, and give us a call. We can find it for you, too, if you can't.
And your website?
MattCParker.com.
Matt, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's a pleasure talking to someone in the real estate industry who expresses consciousness in their transactions, and I hope that more and more of you do.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us tonight on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor the Voice Furman. We'll see you next week. Good night, everybody.